The clothing store owner leaned back in his chair, a sly grin spreading across his face. He had just made a decision that he thought would bring him endless amusement. He had hired a disabled man, not because he needed the help, but because he wanted to make fun of him. The man walked with a limp, his hands trembled slightly, and his speech was slow. To the owner, he was the perfect target for his cruel jokes. The disabled man, however, seemed unaware of the owner's intentions. He smiled politely, thanked him for the job, and got to work. His movements were careful and deliberate, as if every step mattered. The owner watched him from a distance, already planning how he and his staff would mock him later. But there was something unusual about the disabled man. His eyes held a quiet strength, and his calm demeanor was almost unsettling. When the owner made his first joke at the man's expense, the disabled man simply smiled and continued working. It was as if he knew something the owner didn't. By the end of the day, the owner felt a strange unease. The disabled man had done nothing wrong, yet his presence seemed to fill the store with an unspoken tension. As the man left for the day, he turned to the owner and said, "Thank you for the opportunity. You won't regret it." The owner laughed nervously, but deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Little did he know, his life was about to take a turn he could never have imagined. The next morning, the store buzzed with activity as customers browsed through racks of clothes. The disabled man arrived early, just as he had promised. He moved slowly but methodically, organizing the shelves and assisting customers with a gentle smile. The owner watched him closely, his initial unease replaced by a growing sense of amusement. "Look at him," the owner whispered to one of his staff members, a young woman who often joined in on his jokes. "He thinks he's actually helping. This is going to be fun." The staff member giggled, and soon, others joined in. They began making subtle comments, loud enough for the disabled man to hear but disguised as casual conversation. "Hey, do you think he can even lift that box?" one employee joked, pointing to a stack of clothing the disabled man was carrying. "Maybe we should get him a wheelchair," another added, laughing. The disabled man paused for a moment, his back turned to them. For a brief second, his shoulders stiffened, but then he continued working as if nothing had happened. His calmness only fueled their mockery. As the day went on, the jokes became more direct. The owner even called the disabled man over to the counter and handed him a pile of mismatched hangers. "Here," the owner said with a smirk. "Sort these out. It should be easy enough for someone like you." The disabled man took the hangers without a word and began sorting them meticulously. His hands trembled slightly, but his focus never wavered. The owner and his staff exchanged amused glances, convinced they were in control of the situation. But then, something unexpected happened. A customer walked into the store, a tall, well-dressed man with an air of authority. He browsed through the racks, his eyes occasionally flicking toward the disabled man. There was something about the way he looked at him, a mix of curiosity and recognition, that made the owner uneasy. The customer approached the counter, his gaze fixed on the disabled man. "Interesting choice," the customer said, his voice low but firm. The owner frowned. "What do you mean?" The customer glanced at the disabled man, who was still sorting hangers, and then back at the owner. "Hiring someone like him. It takes a certain kind of person to see value where others don't." The owner laughed nervously. "Oh, he's just here to help out. Nothing special." The customer's expression darkened. "Be careful," he said, his tone serious. "Mocking someone like him can have consequences you're not prepared for." Before the owner could respond, the customer turned and walked out of the store, leaving behind an awkward silence. The staff exchanged confused glances, but the owner brushed it off. "What a weirdo," he muttered, trying to regain his confidence. The disabled man, however, seemed unbothered by the exchange. He finished sorting the hangers and placed them neatly on the counter. "Is there anything else you need?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. The owner hesitated, suddenly feeling a pang of guilt. But it was quickly replaced by irritation. "No, that's all," he snapped. "Just keep doing what you're doing." As the disabled man walked away, the owner couldn't shake the customer's warning. It lingered in the back of his mind, a nagging thought he couldn't ignore. Later that evening, as the store closed for the day, the owner noticed something strange. The disabled man had left behind a small, folded piece of paper on the counter. Curious, the owner picked it up and unfolded it. Written in neat handwriting were the words, "Every action has a consequence. Choose wisely." The owner stared at the note, his heart pounding. He crumpled it up and threw it in the trash, trying to convince himself it was nothing. But deep down, he knew something was changing. The next morning, the store opened as usual. The disabled man arrived on time, his demeanor as calm as ever. But the owner couldn't help noticing the way the man's eyes seemed to pierce through him, as if he could see every thought, every doubt. The mockery continued, but it felt hollow now, as if the laughter had lost its edge. The owner tried to brush it off, but the sense of unease grew stronger with each passing hour. By the end of the day, the store was quiet. The staff had left, and the owner was alone, locking up for the night. As he turned off the lights, he thought he heard a faint whisper. "Choose wisely." He spun around, his heart racing, but the store was empty. Shaken, the owner hurried out, locking the door behind him. He told himself it was just his imagination, but the words echoed in his mind. Little did he know, the consequences of his actions were just beginning. The next day, the store was unusually quiet. The owner arrived early, hoping to shake off the lingering unease from the previous night. But as soon as he stepped inside, he felt it again, the strange tension that seemed to fill the air whenever the disabled man was around. The disabled man arrived shortly after, his calm demeanor unchanged. He greeted the owner with a polite nod and began his work, organizing the shelves and assisting customers with the same quiet efficiency. The owner watched him closely, trying to figure out what made him so unsettling. As the morning passed, the store remained eerily silent. The usual chatter among the staff was absent, replaced by awkward glances and hushed whispers. The owner tried to lighten the mood by cracking a few jokes, but they fell flat. Even the staff seemed hesitant to join in. Then, the mysterious customer returned. He walked into the store with the same air of authority as before, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on the disabled man. The owner felt a knot tighten in his stomach as the customer approached the counter. "We need to talk," the customer said, his tone firm but not unkind. The owner hesitated, then nodded. "Sure. What's this about?" The customer glanced at the disabled man, who was helping a young woman choose a dress, and then back at the owner. "You don't know who he is, do you?" The owner frowned. "Who, him?" "He's just a guy I hired to help out." "Why?" The customer leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "He's not just anyone. He's different. Special. And if you keep treating him the way you have been, you're going to regret it." The owner laughed nervously, trying to brush off the warning. "Look, I don't know what you're talking about. He's just a disabled guy. There's nothing special about him." The customer's expression darkened. "You're making a mistake. A big one. I've seen what happens to people who underestimate him. Don't say I didn't warn you." Before the owner could respond, the customer turned and walked out of the store, leaving behind a heavy silence. The owner stared after him, his mind racing. Who was this guy? And why did he care so much about the disabled man? As the day went on, the owner couldn't shake the customer's words. They echoed in his mind, growing louder with each passing hour. He tried to distract himself by focusing on his work, but every time he looked at the disabled man, he felt a pang of guilt. That evening, as the store closed, the owner decided to confront the disabled man. He waited until the staff had left, then approached him cautiously. "Hey," the owner said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" The disabled man looked up from the shelf he was organizing and nodded. "Of course. What's on your mind?" The owner hesitated, unsure of how to begin. I just wanted to ask you something. That customer who came in earlier, do you know him?" The disabled man smiled faintly. "I've met him before. He's a good man. Very perceptive." The owner frowned. "What did he mean when he said you're special?" The disabled man's smile widened, but there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I think you already know the answer to that." The owner shook his head, frustrated. "No, I don't. I don't understand any of this. Who are you, really?" The disabled man sighed and set down the clothes he was holding. "I'm just a man, like anyone else. But I've been given a gift, a chance to see the world in a way most people can't. And I use that gift to help others, even when they don't deserve it." The owner stared at him, his mind reeling. "What kind of gift?" The disabled man's gaze softened. "The gift of understanding. Of seeing people for who they truly are, not just what they appear to be. And sometimes, that means showing them the consequences of their actions." The owner felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean?" The disabled man stepped closer, his eyes locking onto the owner's. "You've been given a chance to change. To be better. But if you don't take it, there will be consequences. And they won't be pleasant. To be better. But if you don't take it, there will be consequences. And they won't be pleasant." The owner took a step back, his heart pounding. "Are you threatening me?" The disabled man shook his head. "No. I'm warning you. The choice is yours. But choose wisely." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving the owner alone in the dimly lit store. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of the disabled man's footsteps fading into the distance. The owner sank into a chair, his mind racing. He didn't know what to believe. Was the disabled man really some kind of guardian? Or was this all just a strange coincidence? As he sat there, he noticed something on the counter, a small, folded piece of paper, just like the one from the night before. With trembling hands, he picked it up and unfolded it. Written in the same neat handwriting were the words, "The first step to change is acceptance." The owner stared at the note, his heart heavy with guilt and fear. He didn't know what to do, but he knew one thing for certain: his life was about to change, whether he was ready for it or not. The next morning, the owner woke up feeling restless. The note from the disabled man played over and over in his mind, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. He arrived at the store earlier than usual, hoping to clear his head, but as soon as he stepped inside, he knew something was wrong. The store felt different, colder, quieter, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The owner turned on the lights and began his usual routine, but every sound seemed amplified, every shadow seemed to move. He tried to convince himself it was just his imagination, but the unease lingered. When the disabled man arrived, the owner watched him closely, searching for any sign of what he had hinted at the night before. But the man was the same as always, calm, focused, and seemingly unaware of the tension in the air. As the day went on, strange things began to happen. First, it was small things. A hanger would fall off a rack for no reason, or a stack of clothes would shift slightly, as if someone had brushed past them. The owner tried to ignore it, chalking it up to coincidence, but the incidents grew more frequent. Then, the whispers started. At first, the owner thought it was just the sound of customers talking, but the whispers seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. They were faint, almost inaudible, but they sent chills down his spine. "Choose wisely. The owner spun around, his heart racing, but the store was empty. He shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts, but the whispers continued, growing louder and more insistent. By midday, the staff began to notice. "Did you hear that?" one employee asked, her voice trembling. "Hear what?" another replied, though his pale face suggested he already knew. The owner tried to reassure them, but his own fear made it hard to sound convincing. "It's nothing," he said, forcing a smile. "Just the wind or something." But no one believed him. The disabled man, however, seemed unaffected. He moved through the store with the same quiet efficiency, his calmness a stark contrast to the growing chaos. The owner couldn't help but notice how the strange occurrences seemed to follow him, as if they were tied to his presence. That afternoon, a customer entered the store, a middle-aged woman with a kind face. She browsed through the racks, her eyes occasionally flicking toward the disabled man. When she approached the counter to make a purchase, she hesitated, her gaze lingering on him. "Excuse me," she said softly, "but, is he okay?" The owner frowned. "Who?" The woman nodded toward the disabled man, who was organizing a display nearby. "Him. He seems different. Special, in a way." The owner's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" The woman smiled faintly. "I don't know how to explain it. He just radiates something. Like he's not entirely of this world." Before the owner could respond, the woman paid for her purchase and left, leaving him more unsettled than ever. As the day wore on, the strange occurrences grew more intense. Lights flickered, objects moved on their own, and the whispers became so loud that the owner could barely think. The staff grew increasingly nervous, and some even left early, unable to handle the tension. By the time the store closed, the owner was exhausted. He locked the doors and sank into a chair, his head in his hands. He didn't know what to do. The disabled man's warning echoed in his mind, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being tested. As he sat there, he noticed something on the counter, a small, folded piece of paper. With trembling hands, he picked it up and unfolded it. Written in the same neat handwriting were the words, "The truth will set you free." The owner stared at the note, his heart pounding. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't keep ignoring the signs. That night, as he lay in bed, the owner made a decision. He would confront the disabled man the next day and demand answers. Whatever was happening, he needed to know the truth. But deep down, he feared what that truth might be. The next morning, the owner arrived at the store with a sense of determination. The strange occurrences and the disabled man's cryptic warnings had left him no choice, he needed answers. As he unlocked the doors and stepped inside, he noticed the store felt different again. The air was heavy, almost suffocating, and the usual hum of activity was replaced by an eerie silence. The disabled man arrived shortly after, his calm demeanor unchanged. He greeted the owner with a polite nod and began his work as if nothing was wrong. The owner watched him closely, his heart pounding as he gathered the courage to speak. "We need to talk," the owner said, his voice firm but shaky. The disabled man looked up from the shelf he was organizing and nodded. "Of course. What's on your mind?" The owner hesitated, unsure of how to begin. I need to know the truth." "Who are you?" "Really?" The disabled man smiled faintly and set down the clothes he was holding. "I've already told you. I'm just a man, like anyone else. But I've been given a gift, a chance to see the world in a way most people can't." The owner shook his head, frustrated. "That doesn't explain anything. Why are these strange things happening? Why do people keep saying you're special?" The disabled man's gaze softened, and he stepped closer. "Because I am. But not in the way you think. My disability isn't a weakness, it's a strength. It's allowed me to see the world differently, to understand people in a way others can't. And sometimes, that means showing them the consequences of their actions. The owner frowned, still confused. What do you mean? The disabled man sighed and gestured toward the store. Look around you. This place, it's a reflection of you. The way you've treated me, the way you've treated others, it's all coming back to you now. The owner's eyes widened as he realized what the man was saying. You're saying, this is my fault? That I'm causing all of this? The disabled man nodded. In a way, yes. Your actions have consequences, and those consequences are manifesting here, in this store. The whispers, the strange occurrences, they're all a result of the choices you've made. The owner felt a chill run down his spine. But, how? How is that even possible? The disabled man's expression grew serious. There are forces in this world that most people can't understand. Forces that balance good and evil, kindness and cruelty. I've been sent here to help restore that balance, to show you the error of your ways before it's too late. The owner stared at him, his mind reeling. Sent here? By who? The disabled man smiled faintly. That's not important. What's important is that you understand the power of your choices. Every action, every word, it all matters. And if you don't change, the consequences will only get worse. The owner sank into a chair, his head in his hands. He didn't know what to believe, but deep down, he knew the man was telling the truth. The guilt he had been trying to ignore suddenly felt overwhelming, and he couldn't hold back the tears. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, he said, his voice breaking. I didn't think it mattered. The disabled man placed a hand on his shoulder, his touch surprisingly warm and comforting. It matters. More than you know. But it's not too late to change. You can still make things right. The owner looked up at him, his eyes filled with desperation. How? How do I fix this? The disabled man's smile widened, and for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Start by apologizing. To me, to your staff, to anyone you've hurt. And then, make a promise, to yourself and to the world, that you'll do better. That you'll treat people with kindness and respect, no matter who they are. The owner nodded, his heart heavy but determined. I will. I promise. The disabled man patted his shoulder and stepped back. Good. Remember, the first step to change is acceptance. You've taken that step. Now, it's up to you to keep moving forward. As the disabled man returned to his work, the owner felt a strange sense of relief. The weight that had been crushing him seemed to lift, and for the first time in days, the store felt peaceful. But the owner knew this was only the beginning. The road to redemption wouldn't be easy, and he still had a long way to go. The owner's promise to change marked the beginning of a new chapter, but the road to redemption was far from smooth. The strange occurrences in the store didn't stop immediately. If anything, they intensified, as if testing his resolve. The whispers grew louder, the lights flickered more frequently, and objects continued to move on their own. The staff, already on edge, began to question whether the store was haunted. Some even threatened to quit, unable to handle the growing tension. The owner knew he had to act quickly. He called a meeting with his staff, his heart pounding as he prepared to address the elephant in the room. I know things have been strange lately, he began, his voice shaky but sincere. And I know I haven't been the best boss. I've made mistakes, and I've hurt people. For that, I'm truly sorry. The staff exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to respond. One employee, a young woman who had been particularly vocal about the strange occurrences, spoke up. What's going on, though? Why is all this happening? The owner hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. I don't have all the answers. But I think it's connected to the way I've been treating people, especially him. He gestured toward the disabled man, who was quietly organizing a display nearby. The staff turned to look at the disabled man, their expressions a mix of curiosity and fear. The disabled man met their gaze with his usual calm demeanor, his eyes filled with quiet understanding. "He's not just an ordinary person," the owner continued, his voice growing stronger. "He's here to teach us something, to teach me something. And I think the strange things happening are a result of my actions. My choices." The room fell silent as the staff processed his words. The young woman who had spoken earlier frowned. "So, what do we do?" The owner took a deep breath. "We start by treating each other with kindness and respect. And we apologize, to him, to each other, and to anyone we've hurt. It's the only way to make things right." The staff nodded slowly, their fear giving way to a sense of determination. One by one, they approached the disabled man and apologized for their behavior. The disabled man accepted their apologies with a gentle smile, his calmness putting them at ease. But the owner knew this was only the first step. The strange occurrences continued, though they seemed less intense now, as if the store itself was waiting to see if the changes would last. That evening, as the store closed, the owner approached the disabled man once more. "I've done what you asked," he said, his voice filled with hope. "I've apologized, and I've promised to change. But, the strange things are still happening. What else can I do?" The disabled man smiled faintly. "Change takes time. The consequences of your actions won't disappear overnight. But if you stay true to your promise, they will fade. Trust the process." The owner nodded, though he still felt uneasy. "And what about you? Are you going to stay?" The disabled man's smile widened. "For now, yes. But my time here is limited. Once I've fulfilled my purpose, I'll move on." The owner felt a pang of sadness at the thought of the man leaving, but he knew it was inevitable. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "For everything." The disabled man nodded and turned to leave, but before he did, he handed the owner a small, folded piece of paper. "Read this when you're ready," he said, his voice soft but firm. The owner waited until the man had left before unfolding the note. Written in the same neat handwriting were the words, "The journey to redemption is never easy, but it is always worth it." The owner stared at the note, his heart filled with a mix of hope and determination. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he was ready to face it. The owner's journey to redemption began in earnest the next day. He woke up with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to make amends for his past actions. But he quickly realized that change wasn't as simple as making a promise, it required consistent effort and a willingness to confront his own flaws. The store, however, seemed to respond positively to his efforts. The strange occurrences began to lessen, and the whispers grew quieter, as if the store itself was acknowledging his attempts to change. The staff, too, noticed the shift in atmosphere and began to relax, their fear giving way to cautious optimism. The owner started by making small but meaningful changes. He treated his staff with more respect, listening to their concerns and offering support when needed. He also made a conscious effort to be kinder to customers, greeting them with a smile and going out of his way to assist them. But the biggest change was in how he treated the disabled man. No longer did he mock him or make cruel jokes. Instead, he treated him with the same respect and kindness he showed everyone else. He even began to see the man in a new light, noticing the quiet strength and wisdom that had always been there. One afternoon, as the store was particularly busy, the owner noticed the disabled man struggling to reach a high shelf. Without hesitation, he walked over and offered to help. "Here, let me get that for you," he said, his voice filled with genuine kindness. The disabled man smiled and stepped aside. "Thank you. I appreciate it." As the owner reached for the item on the shelf, he felt a strange sense of fulfillment. It was a small act, but it symbolized the larger changes he was trying to make. Later that day, the owner decided to take things a step further. He called another staff meeting, this time with a more positive tone. "I want to thank all of you for sticking with me through this difficult time," he began, his voice filled with sincerity. "I know I haven't been the best boss, but I'm committed to changing that. From now on, this store will be a place of kindness and respect, for everyone." The staff nodded, their expressions a mix of relief and hope. One employee, the young woman who had been particularly vocal about the strange occurrences, spoke up. "We're glad to hear that. But, what about him?" She gestured toward the disabled man, who was quietly organizing a display nearby. The owner smiled. "He's a part of this team, just like the rest of us. And he's taught me more than I ever expected. I owe him a lot." The disabled man looked up and met the owner's gaze, his eyes filled with quiet understanding. For a moment, the room fell silent, as if everyone could feel the weight of the moment. As the days passed, the store began to thrive in ways the owner hadn't imagined. Customers noticed the positive atmosphere and returned more frequently, often bringing friends and family with them. The staff, too, seemed happier and more motivated, their fear replaced by a sense of pride in their work. But the owner knew his journey wasn't over. He still had moments of doubt, times when the old habits threatened to resurface. During those moments, he would remember the disabled man's words and the note he had given him: "The journey to redemption is never easy, but it is always worth it." One evening, as the store closed, the owner approached the disabled man once more. "I feel like I've come a long way," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "But I know there's still more to do. How do I keep moving forward?" The disabled man smiled faintly. "By remembering why you started. Change isn't about being perfect, it's about trying, every day, to be better than you were the day before. And by helping others along the way." The owner nodded, his heart filled with determination. "I'll do my best. I promise." The disabled man placed a hand on his shoulder, his touch warm and comforting. "I know you will. And remember, you're not alone in this. We're all here to support you." As the disabled man walked away, the owner felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. He knew the road ahead would still have challenges, but he was ready to face them. The owner's journey of redemption had brought significant changes to the store and his life, but he knew the ultimate test was yet to come. The disabled man had hinted that his time at the store was limited, and the owner couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. One morning, as the owner arrived at the store, he noticed a crowd gathered outside. Curious, he approached and saw a man arguing loudly with one of his staff members. The man was visibly upset, his face red with anger as he shouted about a defective product he had purchased. The owner's heart sank. This was exactly the kind of situation he would have handled poorly in the past, dismissing the customer's concerns or even mocking them. But now, he knew he had to do better. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Sir, I'm the owner of this store. Can you tell me what's wrong?" The man turned to him, his anger momentarily replaced by surprise. "I bought this jacket last week, and the zipper broke already. I want a refund." The owner nodded, his mind racing. He could feel the eyes of his staff and the disabled man on him, watching to see how he would handle the situation. This was his final test, and he knew it. "I'm really sorry to hear that," the owner said, his tone sincere. "Let me take a look." He examined the jacket carefully, noting the broken zipper. It was clear the issue was due to a manufacturing defect, not the customer's misuse. In the past, he might have argued or refused to take responsibility, but now he knew better. "You're right," the owner said, looking the man in the eye. "This shouldn't have happened. I'll give you a full refund, and I'll also replace the jacket with a new one, free of charge." The man's anger melted away, replaced by gratitude. Really? You do that? The owner smiled. Of course. Your satisfaction is important to us. And again, I'm truly sorry for the inconvenience. As the man left with his refund and a new jacket, the owner felt a sense of pride he hadn't felt in years. He had handled the situation with kindness and integrity, and it had made all the difference. But the test wasn't over. Later that day, a delivery truck arrived with a large shipment of new inventory. The owner and his staff began unloading the boxes, but as they worked, one of the employees accidentally dropped a heavy box, causing it to burst open. Clothes spilled out, some of them damaged. The employee, a young man who had only been working at the store for a few weeks, looked horrified. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." The owner interrupted him with a reassuring smile. "It's okay. Accidents happen. Let's just clean this up and see what we can salvage." The employee stared at him, clearly surprised by his calm reaction. "You're not mad?" The owner shook his head. "No. What's important is that we learn from this and make sure it doesn't happen again. But for now, let's focus on fixing the problem." As they worked together to clean up the mess, the owner noticed the disabled man watching from a distance. His expression was unreadable, but there was a hint of approval in his eyes. That evening, as the store closed, the owner approached the disabled man once more. "I feel like I've passed some kind of test today," he said, his voice filled with hope. "But I know there's still more to do." "What's next?" The disabled man smiled faintly. "You've done well. But the final test is yet to come. It will be the hardest one of all." The owner frowned. "What do you mean?" The disabled man's expression grew serious. "You'll know when it happens. Just remember, stay true to your promise, no matter how difficult it seems." The owner nodded, his heart pounding. He didn't know what to expect, but he was determined to face whatever came his way. The next morning, the final test arrived. A woman entered the store, her face filled with desperation. She approached the owner and explained that her husband had lost his job, and they were struggling to make ends meet. She needed clothes for her children but couldn't afford to pay. The owner listened carefully, his heart breaking for her. In the past, he might have turned her away, but now he knew better. "Don't worry," he said, his voice filled with compassion. "Take whatever you need. It's on the house." The woman stared at him, tears filling her eyes. "Are you serious? You'd do that for me?" The owner nodded. "Of course. We're all in this together. If I can help, I will." As the woman left with a bag full of clothes, the owner felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known. He had faced his final test and passed with flying colors. But when he turned to look for the disabled man, he was gone. The owner stood in the middle of the store, his heart heavy with a mix of emotions. The disabled man was gone, leaving behind only the lessons he had taught and the changes he had inspired. The store felt different now, lighter, warmer, as if the weight of the past had finally been lifted. The staff noticed the owner's somber expression and approached him cautiously. "Is everything okay?" one of them asked, her voice filled with concern. The owner nodded, though his eyes were distant. "He's gone. The man who changed everything. He's gone." The staff exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to respond. They had all felt the disabled man's presence in their own way, and his absence left a void that was hard to explain. The owner took a deep breath and turned to his team. "But he left us with something important. A reminder that kindness and respect can change lives. And it's up to us to carry that forward." The staff nodded, their expressions filled with determination. They had all witnessed the owner's transformation, and it had inspired them to be better as well. As the days passed, the store continued to thrive. Customers praised the positive atmosphere, and the staff worked together with a sense of purpose and pride. The strange occurrences had stopped completely, and the whispers were replaced by laughter and conversation. But the owner couldn't shake the feeling that the disabled man's departure was a sign, a reminder that his journey wasn't over. He knew he had to honor the man's legacy by continuing to grow and help others. One evening, as the store closed, the owner found a small, folded piece of paper on the counter. His heart skipped a beat as he recognized the neat handwriting. He unfolded it carefully, his hands trembling. Written on the paper were the words, "The greatest gift you can give is the gift of kindness. Pass it on." The owner stared at the note, his eyes filling with tears. He knew it was the disabled man's final message, a reminder of the lessons he had taught and the impact he had made. The next morning, the owner decided to take things a step further. He gathered his staff and announced a new initiative. The store would donate a portion of its profits to local charities, focusing on helping people with disabilities and those in need. "We've been given a second chance," he said, his voice filled with passion. "And it's our responsibility to use it to make a difference. Let's honor the man who changed our lives by helping others change theirs." The staff cheered, their enthusiasm a testament to the store's transformation. They worked together to organize charity events, volunteer opportunities, and community outreach programs, turning the store into a beacon of hope and kindness. As the months passed, the owner's journey of redemption became a source of inspiration for the entire community. People came from far and wide to visit the store, not just for its products but for the positive energy that filled its walls. One day, as the owner was helping a customer, he noticed a young boy with a disability entering the store. The boy's eyes lit up as he looked around, and the owner felt a familiar warmth in his chest. He approached the boy and knelt down to his level. "Welcome to our store. Is there anything I can help you with?" The boy smiled shyly. "I just wanted to look around. My mom said this place is special." The owner's heart swelled with pride. "It is special. And you're always welcome here." As the boy explored the store, the owner felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known. He realized that the disabled man's legacy wasn't just about changing one person, it was about creating a ripple effect of kindness that could touch countless lives. That evening, as the store closed, the owner stood outside and looked up at the sky. He felt a sense of peace, knowing that he had honored the disabled man's teachings and made a difference in the world. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice filled with gratitude. "For showing me the way." As he turned to go back inside, he noticed a faint glow in the distance, a single star shining brighter than the rest. He smiled, knowing it was a sign that the disabled man's spirit was still with him, guiding him on his journey. The lesson. The story of the clothing store owner and the disabled man is a powerful reminder that kindness and respect can change lives. It teaches us that everyone deserves a second chance and that our actions, no matter how small, can have a profound impact on others. By choosing to be kind, we not only transform ourselves but also inspire those around us to do the same. The disabled man's legacy lives on in the store and in the hearts of everyone who was touched by his presence. His final message, "The greatest gift you can give is the gift of kindness. Pass it on," serves as a timeless lesson for us all.